Okay. Sarah sounded wary. So you're giving in? Going green? Hell no, that's just the cover. At night. Sarah, at night. They flash. They what? Flash, I elaborated gleefully. Like programmable flashing patterns. Maybe a gentle pulse, maybe a wave effect, maybe synchronized blinking. All perfectly legal because the flashing isn't decorative. See? It's just an integrated indicator light system showing. I don't know. Optimal nocturnal energy storage cycles or photovoltaic cell diagnostic status or some other official-sounding bullshit I'll make up. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end. Then Sarah burst out laughing. You are completely, utterly insane, Alex, and I absolutely love it. Just promise me you won't accidentally signal UFOs. Cross my heart, I said. Unless Brenda complains about them too. It started, as these things often do, with good intentions and low-voltage LEDs. I'd just spent a Saturday afternoon meticulously installing some new landscape lights. You know the kind. Warm white, subtle, tucked away under bushes, tracing the curve of the walkway. Classy stuff. My goal wasn't Las Vegas Strip. It was more, welcome home, please don't trip over the rogue garden gnome ambiance. I stood back, admiring my handiwork as dusk settled, the soft glow making my slightly neglected hydrangeas look downright dramatic. Okay, nailed it, I murmured, feeling that satisfying little hum of a DIY project successfully completed. Looks cozy, welcoming. Just enough light to stop Aunt Carol from face-planting into the azaleas again during her next visit. I snapped a quick picture with my phone, mostly for my own smug satisfaction. My neighbor Bob gave me a thumbs up from his driveway. See? Classy. Approved by Bob. What more validation did I need? Apparently, I needed validation from the Shadow Council, the Keepers of Conformity, the dreaded Homeowners Association. A few days later, nestled amongst junk mail and a flyer for discount pizza, was the envelope. You know the one. Cheap, slightly off-white paper. The HOA's return address printed slightly crookedly, like even the printer was depressed. My stomach did that familiar little clench. Nothing good ever arrives in an HOA envelope unless it's the bill for dues you already paid. I slid it open with a sense of foreboding. Inside, crisp and officious, was a violation notice. Subject, unapproved exterior illumination. Are you kidding me? It cited Bylaw 7, subsection F, paragraph 3, concerning exterior modifications, and something vague about excessive or aesthetically disruptive lighting. Aesthetically disruptive? My tasteful warm white LEDs? The ones Bob liked? The notice politely informed me I had 10 days to extinguish my offensive luminaries or face the wrath of fines, presumably calculated based on lumens per square inch of noncompliance. Aesthetically disruptive? I sputtered, pacing my kitchen. Brenda, your collection of concrete geese wearing seasonal pilgrim outfits is aesthetically disruptive. My lights are classy. They whisper elegance. Your geese scream existential dread but make it festive. Brenda, naturally, was the HOA president, a woman whose primary joy in life seemed to be measuring lawn heights with a laser level and finding fault. Okay, deep breaths. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe the enforcement drone they sent out after dark mistook my gentle glow for a rogue lighthouse guiding ships astray on our suburban sea. Reason would prevail. Logic would win the day. I decided to appeal at the next monthly HOA meeting. The meeting was held, as always, in the community clubhouse, a soul-crushingly beige room that smelled faintly of stale coffee and shattered dreams. I arrived armed with printouts, pictures of my subtle lighting from various angles, comparison photos of much brighter lights on houses outside our HOA's iron grip, even the manufacturer's specs highlighting the low wattage and warm color temperature. Brenda was already seated at the head table, flanked by 2 other board members. Janice, who looked perpetually nervous, and Dave, who looked perpetually asleep. When my agenda item came up, I presented my case calmly, logically. "So, as you can see," I concluded, gesturing to my photos projected fuzzily onto the wall via an ancient projector. "The lights are low-wattage LEDs, warm white spectrum, shielded downwards to minimize any upward glare. They're purely functional for safety along the walkway and, I believe, enhance the property's curb appeal without causing any disturbance to neighbors." I smiled hopefully. Brenda peered at my presentation over the top of her glasses, her expression suggesting I'd just proposed installing a flaming catapult on my lawn. "Mr. Henderson," she began, her voice dripping with condescending patience, "the bylaws, which you received upon purchasing your home, clearly state in Section 12, Addendum B, that all exterior modifications, visible from the street or adjacent properties, including but not limited to structures, landscaping alterations, and lighting, require prior written approval from the Architectural Review Committee. Did you obtain said approval, Mr. Henderson?" "Well, no," I admitted, feeling my cheeks flush, "because they're standard landscape lights, the kind you buy at any hardware store. I didn't realize basic safety lighting needed a multi-week review process involving submitting paint swatches of the darkness they'd be illuminating." "Ignorance of the bylaws," Brenda intoned, cutting me off, "is not an excuse. The lights are unapproved. Furthermore," she added, warming to her theme, "they contribute to unnecessary light pollution, disrupting the nocturnal ecosystem." This from a woman whose own porch light blazed with the intensity of a small sun, attracting every moth within a 5-mile radius. "Light pollution," I sputtered, losing my carefully crafted calm. "Brenda, they're dimmer than your phone screen. My grandma's nightlight is brighter than these." Janice fidgeted nervously. "Rules are rules, Mr. Henderson," she mumbled, avoiding eye contact. Dave snorted softly, possibly waking himself up for a second before subsiding again. My appeal was, of course, denied. Swiftly, unanimously. Even Dave managed a weak hand raise. Brenda informed me I was welcome to remove the lights and then submit a formal application to the Architectural Review Committee, complete with scale drawings, light scattering diagrams, and probably a blood sample. The process, she added with a thin smile, typically took 6 to 8 weeks, and approval was not guaranteed, especially for lighting deemed non-essential. I walked out of that beige room fuming. It wasn't about the lights anymore. It was about the principle, the petty tyranny of the beige brigade. Fine. They didn't like those lights. What about different lights? A few nights later, under the cloak of darkness, because my walkway was now treacherously unlit, I implemented Plan B. I swapped the LEDs for a string of tiny, solar-powered fairy lights, woven discreetly into a large azalea bush near the porch. They were barely visible, emitting a soft, intermittent twinkle. Think fireflies, if fireflies ran on cheap solar cells and questionable Chinese manufacturing. Surely this couldn't offend anyone. They were practically invisible. They ran on sunshine and wishes. 2 days later, another beige envelope. Violation notice #2. Subject: unapproved decorative illumination, twinkling. This time, the fine was explicitly stated $50, payable within 7 days. "Sarah, you are not going to believe this," I ranted into my phone later that day. My friend Sarah, a fellow survivor of HOA absurdity in her own neighborhood, was my go-to therapist for this kind of nonsense. "They fined me for fairy lights, the kind you use to decorate sad little dorm room plants. Brenda called them unnecessary twinkling distractions in the notice." Sarah sighed sympathetically. "Brenda sounds like a certified nightmare. Why don't you just give up, take them down? It's not worth the fight." "It's the principle, Sarah," I insisted, pacing again. "They're my bushes. It's my house. Where does it end? Next, she'll be citing me because my welcome mat is too welcoming, or the squirrels are burying nuts in an unapproved pattern." Okay, calm down, Sarah said. "Just be careful. People like Brenda have too much time on their hands." I grudgingly took down the fairy lights, plunging my yard back into Stygian darkness. Aunt Carol would just have to navigate by memory. But Sarah was right about one thing. Brenda did seem to have too much time on her hands. And now, it felt like most of it was dedicated to me. I started noticing her more. Her car seemed to drive past my house just a little slower than necessary. Her evening walks with her perpetually yapping poodle seemed to linger near my property line. I caught her gaze flicking towards my house more often. I was being watched, targeted. She was waiting, hoping, for me to slip up again, plant the wrong color petunias, leave my trash cans out for 5 extra minutes, maybe breathe in an aesthetically disruptive manner. This wasn't about lights. This was about power, her power, my lack of it. That night, fueled by righteous indignation and a healthy dose of spite, I pulled out the HOA Declaration of Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions, the CC and Rs, that unholy brick of legalese I'd skimmed when I bought the house. I read it cover to cover. Then I read it again, this time with a highlighter and a growing sense of malicious intent. I noted the meticulous detail regarding fence heights, mailbox designs, approved exterior paint colors, 50 shades of beige, basically. I noted the explicit prohibition of flashing or strobe lights, unless part of a security system. I noted the vague language around nuisances and aesthetic harmony. And then I noticed what wasn't there. There were pages about landscaping, satellite dishes, even flagpole etiquette. But there was a curious lack of specific regulation regarding roof-mounted fixtures, especially functional ones. And the bylaws were very clear on distinguishing between decorative lighting, bad, and functional lighting, generally okay if ugly. An idea started to flicker. What's undeniably functional? What goes on a roof? What could possibly be considered an improvement by even the most stringent HOA, especially one that paid lip service to environmental responsibility? Solar panels. They generate power. They save money. They reduce carbon footprints. They scream responsible homeowner. How could Brenda possibly object to solar panels? They were practically sacred cows in the suburban lexicon. Installing solar panels would be compliance. Boring, sensible compliance. But a mischievous little voice whispered in the back of my mind. What if they weren't just solar panels? What if compliance could also be annoying? What if functional could also be flashy? The HOA rules forbade flashing decorative lights. But what about flashing functional lights? Like indicator lights, diagnostic lights, lights that just happened to be part of a complex, eco-friendly energy system. A slow, evil grin spread across my face. It felt like discovering a cheat code for suburban warfare. "Okay, Sarah, picture this," I said excitedly into the phone the next day, unable to contain my diabolical glee. "My entire roof, covered in sleek, modern black-on-black solar panels, looks totally normal during the day. I'm saving energy, hugging trees, probably getting nominated for Neighborhood Eco-Citizen of the Year by Brenda herself." "Okay." Sarah sounded wary. "So you're giving in? Going green?" "Hell no, that's just the cover. At night, Sarah, at night, they flash." "They what?" "Flash," I elaborated gleefully. "Like programmable flashing patterns. Maybe a gentle pulse, maybe a wave effect, maybe synchronized blinking. All perfectly legal because the flashing isn't decorative. See? It's just an integrated indicator light system showing." "I don't know." optimal nocturnal energy storage cycles, or photovoltaic cell diagnostic status, or some other official-sounding bullshit I'll make up. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end. Then Sarah burst out laughing. "You are completely, utterly insane, Alex. And I absolutely love it. Just promise me you won't accidentally signal UFOs." "Cross my heart," I said. "Unless Brenda complains about them too." Now came the hard part. Turning this beautiful, spite-fueled dream into reality. My day job involved software, not hardware, but I wasn't afraid of a little technical challenge, especially when motivated by the thought of Brenda's inevitable aneurysm. Standard solar installers, I quickly discovered, were not amused by inquiries about adding programmable nocturnal flashing modes to their systems. "Sir, our panels are designed to generate electricity, not mimic a disco ball," one bewildered sales rep told me. Fine, I'd have to go custom. This meant diving deep into the slightly murky world of solar components, microcontrollers, and high-brightness LEDs. Grid tie inverters were out. They just pushed power to the grid. I needed a hybrid system, something with batteries and more control, or maybe I didn't need the panels themselves to flash. That seemed needlessly complicated and potentially warranty-voiding. What if I mounted small, powerful, individually addressable RGB LEDs underneath or alongside the panels, wired back to a controller in the attic? From the street, especially at night, it would look like the panels were flashing. Yes, much simpler. Ish. My evenings became a blur of online research. I learned more than I ever wanted to know about PWM frequencies, MOSFETs, waterproof enclosures, and the surprising variety of programmable LED strips available from questionable overseas suppliers. I spent hours comparing specs, reading forums where guys built insane Christmas light displays synchronized to death metal, and trying to decipher wiring diagrams that looked like spaghetti thrown at a circuit board. I talked to my friend Ben, an actual electrician. "So, Ben," I began casually, "hypothetically, if someone wanted to run low-voltage DC wiring across their roof, alongside the conduits for, say, solar panels, and connect it to maybe 100 or so waterproof LED modules controlled by a Raspberry Pi in the attic, triggered by a photosensor, would that, violate any major codes?" Ben stared at me. "Alex, what are you building? A landing strip for tiny airplanes? Why would anyone do that?" Advanced solar diagnostic system?" I tried. He just sighed. "As long as the low-voltage stuff is properly insulated, fused, and doesn't interfere with the main AC wiring, it's probably not illegal. Weird as hell, but not illegal. Just don't burn your house down, okay?" "No promises," I chirped. Finding the actual components involved navigating a minefield of online marketplaces and surplus electronics stores. "Yes, I need 150 of the WS2812B modules," I explained to a bored-sounding guy at an online supplier based somewhere vaguely described as Shenzhen Tech Hub. Waterproof-rated IP67 or higher. High brightness, and a suitable controller, needs Wi-Fi, timer function, and the ability to handle complex sequencing based on external triggers. "Building a big Christmas display, huh?" the guy asked. "Something like that," I replied smoothly. "Let's call it Sustainable Nocturnal Ambience Monitoring." He didn't ask any more questions after I placed the order. The most nerve-wracking part was the installation. I hired a reputable local company to install the actual solar panels. They were professional, efficient, and thankfully incurious about the extra roll of low-voltage wiring I kept accidentally leaving near their work area. While they were busy mounting rails and panels, I was up on the roof with them, pretending to be fascinated by their process, asking dumb questions about torque specs, all while surreptitiously running my own LED wiring alongside their conduits, tucking it out of sight. Just really interested in the technology, I explained brightly to the foreman, trying not to look like a man committing premeditated acts of electronic annoyance. He just grunted and tightened another bolt. Once the panels were up and the installers were gone, I spent a frantic afternoon and evening connecting the LED modules under the edges of the panels, running the final wires into the attic, and hooking everything up to the Raspberry Pi controller I'd housed in a weatherproof junction box. The programming took hours, debugging stupid syntax errors and timing loops until my eyes burned. I settled on a few initial patterns: a slow, gentle blue pulse, a soft white wave that swept across the roof, and, for special occasions, a faster, multicolor chase sequence I mentally labeled Full Brenda Annoyance Mode. I set the system to activate automatically via a photosensor about 30 minutes after sunset. Brenda had watched the entire solar panel installation from her window, a smug little smile on her face. I imagined her thinking, aha, he's finally caved, spending thousands on solar panels just to get some light back. He knows who's boss is. Oh, Brenda, you sweet summer child. You had no idea. That evening, I sat hunched over my laptop in my darkened living room, monitoring the diagnostic output from the Raspberry Pi in the attic. My heart was pounding like a drum solo. Would it work? Would the cheap LEDs I bought survive the voltage? Would a stray cosmic ray brick the controller? Would the whole thing short out and set my roof on fire, giving Brenda the ultimate victory? The sun dipped below the horizon. Streetlights flickered on. Darkness fell. I watched the photosensor readings on my screen. Threshold reached. Timer activated, script initiated, execute. I held my breath. Nothing happened for a second. Then, through the window, I saw it. A soft blue glow emanated from the edges of my roof. It pulsed gently, rhythmically. Then it shifted, a wave of white light sweeping silently from one end of the roof to the other before returning to the blue pulse. Yes! I hissed, pumping my fist. It works! Oh my God, it actually works! I scrambled for the controls on my laptop, switched the pattern. Now, a faster sequence, reds and greens chasing each other across the roofline. It's beautiful! I choked out, laughing uncontrollably, in the most obnoxious, passive-aggressive, technically compliant way possible. I had to see it from the street. I bolted out the front door, skidding to a halt on the sidewalk. The effect was even better from down here. The sleek, black panels were invisible in the dark, but the lights tracing their edges created a mesmerizing, undeniable display. It wasn't jarringly bright, but it was definitely noticeable. A car driving down the street slowed to a crawl, the driver gawking. A dog down the block started barking uncertainly, and then, the moment I'd been waiting for. Across the street, Brenda's porch light flicked on. A silhouette appeared in her front window, motionless for a second. Then, the front door opened. Brenda stepped out onto her porch, phone already clamped to her ear. Even from across the street, in the dim light, I could see the expression on her face. It was a glorious, terrifying mask of pure, unadulterated fury. "Yes, officer." Her voice, sharp and shrill, carried clearly across the quiet street. "Henderson, 412 Maple Drive. He's done something. His roof, it's flashing like some kind of discotheque. It's unapproved, highly disruptive. Send a patrol car immediately." My neighbor Bob wandered out onto his lawn, rubbing his eyes. "Whoa, Alex," he mumbled, staring up at my roof. "What is that? Did you join a cult?" "Oh, that?" I replied, trying to sound nonchalant, practically vibrating with suppressed laughter. I leaned casually against my mailbox, arms crossed. Just the new solar panels cycling through their nightly energy optimization and diagnostic routine. State of the art, very eco-friendly. I gave Brenda, still screeching into her phone, a cheerful little wave. Her answering glare could have curdled milk. The game was afoot. The police did arrive, eventually. 2 officers, looking profoundly bored, listened patiently to Brenda's increasingly hysterical tirade about flashing lights, disrupted sleep at 8:30 p.m., and the general decline of neighborhood standards. They ambled over to my side of the street. "Evening, sir," one of them said, tilting his head back to look at my roof's gentle blue pulse. "Getting some complaints about your, lights." "Evening, officers," I replied politely. "Those aren't lights, not really. They're integrated diagnostic indicators for my new solar energy system, just letting me know everything's running optimally." I gestured vaguely. "Part of the system's efficiency monitoring. Totally standard on these high-end models." I hoped they wouldn't ask which models. The officers exchanged glances. "Diagnostic indicators," one repeated slowly. He looked back at Brenda, who was practically vibrating on her porch. He looked back at my roof. He sighed. "Right. Well, try to keep the diagnostics, minimally disruptive." "Will do, officers," I said brightly. They got back in their car and drove away, leaving Brenda sputtering in their wake. Round 3. Emergency HOA meeting. The beige room was packed this time, buzzing with a mixture of outrage, curiosity, and amusement. Brenda, looking like she hadn't slept, presented her case with the fervor of a prosecuting attorney at a murder trial. She had blurry nighttime photos, printouts of bylaws, and a list of grievances that included causing disorientation in nocturnal migratory birds. Citation needed. "An absolute menace," she concluded, voice trembling. "A flagrant disregard for our community standards. It's like living next to a casino. Bylaw Section 9, subsection D clearly prohibits nuisance lighting." When it was my turn, I calmly reiterated my position. "Brenda, members of the board," I began, projecting innocence. "With all due respect, these aren't lights in the decorative sense prohibited by the bylaws. These are integrated components of a functional, energy-saving solar power system. The illumination you see," I waved a hand dismissively, "is simply a visual indicator of the system's operational status. Think of it like the blinking light on your Wi-Fi router, just scaled appropriately for a rooftop energy array. It confirms the batteries are charging correctly and the photovoltaic cells are performing within expected parameters. Are you suggesting I disable a crucial safety and efficiency monitoring feature of my system?" Brenda turned purple. "Safety feature? It's giving Mr. Henderson seizures." Mr. Henderson, sitting in the front row, looked up from his newspaper, blinked confusedly, and said, "Eh?" I pressed my advantage. "Furthermore," I continued, adopting a concerned tone, "our HOA actively encourages green initiatives, doesn't it? There's a whole section in the newsletter about sustainability. Solar panels are the epitome of green technology. By questioning these essential diagnostic indicators, are you suggesting the board is now taking an anti-environment stance?" I let that hang in the air. Checkmate. The board was flummoxed. Janice wrung her hands. Dave actually opened both eyes. They flipped through their copies of the bylaws, muttering. The rules covered holiday lights, spotlights, even bug zappers. But flashing solar panel diagnostic indicator lights? Not a word. They couldn't fine me based on existing rules. Brenda demanded they draft an emergency amendment immediately, banning all forms of rooftop blinking, functional or otherwise. Gerald, the flustered president, promised to take it under advisement with the HOA's legal counsel. The letters started arriving a week later. Thick envelopes, this time on expensive lawyer's letterhead. The tone shifted from annoyed bureaucracy to vaguely threatening legalese. Cease and desist creating a public nuisance. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Failure to comply may result in significant daily fines and legal action. Okay, maybe I needed to lawyer up myself. Or at least consult Google Scholar for loopholes in nuisance law. I emailed back politely, reiterating my functional diagnostic indicator defense and asking them to please specify which existing bylaw these indicators violated. I also, as a gesture of goodwill, recalibrated the diagnostic display frequency, switching from the multicolor chase to the slower, calming blue pulse, full time. See? Cooperative. While still annoying, life settled into a weird, illuminated new normal. My flashing roof became my calling card. People started referring to my house as the Tron house, or that place with the disco roof. Surprisingly, my electricity bills actually did go down significantly. Thanks, spite panels. The feud with Brenda simmered. She couldn't nail me on the lights, so she started sending violation notices for my lawn being a quarter-inch too high and my recycling bin being visible from the street for 11 minutes past the approved time frame. Petty, but expected. There were unexpected upsides. Bob confirmed his daughter had used my roof's pulsing glow to find her way home one night when the streetlights were out. See? I told Sarah triumphantly. Safety feature. A pizza delivery guy, hopelessly lost, told me dispatch had directed him to turn right at the gently flashing house. I was a landmark. Then came the big storm. Wind, rain, thunder, the works. And then darkness. A transformer blew somewhere, plunging the entire neighborhood into an inky blackout. Except, not quite entirely. In the middle of the pitch-black street, one house glowed softly. Mine. My solar panels connected to a battery backup system, because if you're going this far, you might as well go all the way, right? Kept my lights on. And yes, the blue pulse on the roof continued its rhythmic beat, a lonely beacon in the storm. Within minutes, my doorbell started ringing. Neighbors, faces illuminated by phone screens, emerged from the darkness. Alex, hey, any chance we could charge our phones? My kid needs his nebulizer. Do you have power? My living room became an impromptu neighborhood charging station and information hub. People huddled together, sharing storm updates and nervously sipping the emergency lukewarm sodas I offered. And then the ultimate moment. A hesitant knock. Standing on my doorstep, looking profoundly uncomfortable, was Brenda. Alex, she mumbled, avoiding my eyes. My husband, his CPAP machine, the battery died. I just smiled. Come on in, Brenda. Plenty of outlets. She stepped inside, muttering thanks, and plugged in the machine. We didn't talk about the lights. We didn't need to. My gently pulsing roof, the source of so much conflict, was now quietly powering her husband's breathing machine. The HOA quietly dropped the flashing nuisance issue after that. They never formally apologized, of course, but the threatening letters stopped. Brenda even gave me a curt nod sometimes when we passed on the street. The blue pulse continued its nightly diagnostic routine, a little dimmer now, perhaps, another gesture of goodwill. A constant, silent reminder of the battle fought, and arguably won. It wasn't just a spite-fueled monstrosity anymore. It was functional, eco-friendly, occasionally helpful, and still just a little bit wonderfully annoying. And sometimes that's the best kind of victory.